Good afternoon. I'm really happy to welcome you today. We're going to talk about the security and the cloud possibilities and the skill development in that regard. We will, of course, try and identify all the different problematics. If we're still facing the same type of risk as a few years ago. So it'll be about understanding where we stand, what's the current situation, what's been evolving. We know that these skills are very difficult to recruit, and there's been a great deal of training possibilities that have been extended. So we'll look at the different branches, the different feedback that we could get on this topic before closing the session. And then, of course, we'll try and manage to leave you some time for your comments and your questions. So, Yann Bonnet is amongst us, who's the CEO from CDS that will provide us with its vision of the campus. Sorry, the General Director on the campus for Campus Cyber, Mathieu Gaillard-Midol. I'm just trying to find his. So we're talking now about Vivian Moura, head of the Industry and Technologies Division within INCYBER. And another person working for Sage, editing some financial solutions with about 3 million clients that are being hosted partly in the cloud. So it'll be about data, about the different experience in different fields of the industry, and we also have a trained and certified expert from Microsoft that will also be there to explain one of the different trends of the market. So this is how this will be organized in 4 different steps. We'll try and identify the needs and the trainings competence-wise. We may start with you, if that's okay with you, Yann. Great. Hello. Well, there might be a point where we can all agree on the IT processes of the 20th century. As any technology, it's helping, and it's also sometimes it has its pros and cons. It has been enabling a lot of things. It was a true revolution in terms of stocking and sharing data. It enabled a lot of automation and created a few blocks more accessible. Economically speaking, it also enabled a possibility of evolution, scalability, and also to favor the creation of companies. If you go to the OVH website, well, just in a couple of clicks, then you access possibilities that only major actors would access before. And at the same time, it does represent a certain amount of threats. There are new ones rising. And cyber criminals can actually be very interested in this set of data that are available, and I think one should also consider the possibility of to externalize competences which instill, a certain dependency. And you were also mentioning it. There's debates around, this economic intelligence taking place. We're pretty much all aware that a European actor that would go for an extra-European solution can be exposed to other types of regulation, that, like the Cloud Out, the CIPSTA, and others, just to mention Americans. Or for intelligence reasons, could also access American companies that would be located in Europe. So, and one really needs to be well aware of it in order to act in a very candid way. So this is, mostly the pros and cons about the cloud. What do you think? Well, I agree with what Yann just said. The cloud is related to a whole series of possibilities, maybe in an environment that is not so controlled as the one we're used to. So it's I would say the real issue is to accompany in front of and support in front of threats. And most of the time the threats are the same when if internal or external. So the idea is to perceive the whole spectrum of the threats, and because we've also changed our way of working, because now we can actually telework, work remotely, that this has been creating new dangers. Sometimes the cloud is a target or a medium for attackers. When it comes to recover some, to steal some data. Well, it's sometimes possible to with one attack to actually get more than one company's data. So, and then when it's come to leaking too, and cloud can also use as a remedy to use infrastructures to be able to carry out crypto mining, or to lead specific attacks. So this is a movement we're following closely. But what can be said is that there are so many instances of scenarios that one needs to remain always vigilant. Mr. Mathieu Gaillard-Midol, what about these move to cloud project? The way to accompany the different types of clients. Well, you'll receive this type of project in all types of clients: industrial, railways, social security services, ministries. So I'm a cloud architect, but I wouldn't say that all data should go on the cloud. I would say that France would need to complete its system using the Azure solution. We were talking about the different types of using the different ways to use the cloud. Well, I think there's been a need of clarification at some point, where Microsoft, would have to deal with European private data, and that would necessarily infringe the law. But all these request system has a clear framework now, and it's not so easy to claim for data right now. And on the FISA part, there's no judiciary part. It's the FBI only has access, and they cannot access content, but metadata. So the risk here to have data being extracted is pretty big, and those companies have a very clear objective, is to create benefits. HDH, for instance, do not have access through Microsoft offers a lockbox functionality, so whenever they need to access your data, they need your authorization, and so this is something that is important and specific. This allows to always remain as a leader, and you also have to know that France and Germany are the biggest info requester compared to other countries of Europe, and of course with the United States. I'm sure we could debate on this for a long time, trying to identify focusing points. So we hear a lot the words data a lot. I think it's important when it comes to security and to our private data, but I think we should not fall into an excess of security. Why do we exactly need, and what do we need to secure, really? We sure have a lot of clients, different types of clients with different types of data and employees' data, but we need to make sure they can to win their trust and respect, and this by respecting the INCYBER recommendation. We're certified, but it does not only go through these channels. I mean, security issues should not be, kept in specific hands. This is all about how we treat and deal with this data. Our job is to make sure that the data can be protected and transferred to and only to the right person. There's a lot of technological improvement that have been taking place in the past years, and everything is changing really, really fast. And I think we need to start working with different types of cyber experts, including architects. We're really witnessing a huge curve, and we really need to have the support of the member states in order to be able to meet with all the requirements in terms of digital protection. So why security? What is the final goal, and why do we need to remain united around this security issue? So what type of skills are we do we need to develop beyond the number of expert? What are the real needs? I mean by that technical skills. We have a security team, the ISO team. We organize trainings on a regular basis. Sorry, I'm sort of speaking Franglish here. So we need continuous education, but not only. We also need a people that deal with the cloud and that need to be trained according to their skills and the way they use these platforms. This is as far as the technical part is concerned, but it's really about sharing responsibilities within the company. I'll try to explain myself. So according to the different level of hierarchy, well, in the past, it was pretty much a joke, but it's no longer a joke, especially since the COVID era and the rising of the digitalization. There's a lot that needed to be implemented, and parallelly, everything that relates to data. I mean, employees need to be trained. They need to be explained why it is important, and in a very pragmatic way, with all the impact that it could have. So we definitely need to work on certification and that we are always on time with technicalities, and we're all concerned by these attacks. So we need to understand each time we've been attacked to understand why it happened and how it happened in order for it to not happen a second time. And then the employees need to understand that each time they're in touch with data, each time they connect to their cloud, they are actually accessing a weak point of the whole system. So, and data may be important, and I'm sure we can work on data, but we can also work on cybersecurity. Thank you, Mathieu. Do you have maybe a more technical vision on that? Well, oftentimes for their move to cloud project, companies would train ex-developers that become dev operators, and that means a lot of teams, that need to be submitted to this work of awareness arising. But I'm also thinking of a lot of cyber teams that will be faced with with new types of attacks according to the data center, and also sometimes to physical events like departure of fire. So the task needs to be well distributed. Now, working in networks. Well, most of the time, networks team are the forgotten teams, and they are not trained on time. And for the cloud part, same thing with the assets, the dealing with the incidents, with the changes. We need to teach them the new usages, and to tell them on a timely fashion before the training becomes outdated. There will also, there is this requirement, if you want to work in the cloud field, to have refreshers and to follow and to attend trainings if you want to have a career. Since given it's changing on a constant basis, you need to train yourself all the time.
Yann, peut-être votre
juste en complément, il y a peut-être un...
So we've been talking about all the technical competences, but for me, there's something else at stake, including with the technical actors. Making sure about how the profession is reacting to this type of impact. If you're experiencing such a result with such data, you need to adjust and maybe try with something else. It's about making sure that technicians and engineers do understand what's at stake, technically speaking, for all these types of professions. And sometimes I have the feeling it's undermined and it's underestimated. And I think it should be thought through a little bit more than it is currently. What about you? Well, on the skill developments related to cloud security, I mean, you guys have mentioned quite a few things, but speaking about a structure with subcontractors, with clients that also need to get trained. It's also about individuals and different professions that are not necessarily well acquainted with these security issues, being the person in charge of financial issues. And there's a great need in terms of knowledge acquisition. It's technical. It's a technical angle that remains accessible when you're not a specialist. I mean, a lot of them are really accessible. And there's a legal aspect, or maybe a political aspect that are there to make sure that you keep the control, you keep up with the control you have and the access you have on all of these functionalities. And in that regard, it also adds up security, the fact that they understand well what they're doing. Then if the key or ID management is not well dealt with, then it can become an issue, the backing up processes. So just purely on the technical aspect, we need to be well aware of how we should behave. And legally speaking, well, according to the country or the continent, there's a lot of issues that need to be taken into account, especially into the threats scenarios. And there's this last part that takes into account the geopolitical situation that could be a conflict or a war. And even though some data transfer agreements exist, it's sometimes not enough. So we need to be well aware of how we need to be protected from what, when it comes to cloud migrations. So as far as I'm concerned, this is really about understanding and controlling. Well, while listening to you, I'm sorry, I didn't take the time to introduce myself. Well, I started to work with the team on the cloud about 5 to 6 years ago, but we very quickly realized that we were missing some key elements in the team, and that most of us needed to get trained again. So I totally share this idea with you. And globally speaking, what about schools? Do we have some specific trainings exist? I mean, there are several possibilities, and so it's really about what's suitable or not according to your framework. I don't know if you'd like to say a word on this. I think there are many actors that are providing cloud training, schools, EPITA, OVH, providers. And I think, in my understanding, you shouldn't stick to one type of solution. You should be flexible and adjust to the and sort of act in an autonomous way, you know, and rapidly understand if this solution fits your needs or not. Some structures actually offer to accompany you in a sort of like tailor-made way, which helps also a lot more than the usual training. Well, even though we're not really a cybersecurity specialist, we're, training evolves very quickly. I used to work for the data part, and we're under attacks constantly, and one need to also proceed in an orderly fashion, because there are several aspects during a training. You need to understand, to sit down at the table, work with the crisis team, and make sure some new measures will be created and implemented, because we always have new types of attacks, and it's the oldest game in the world. But I mean, there's always been new attack. There will always be new attacks and new new security models. I think that's part of the training. You need to be able to assess the attack, understand why we were attacked, what we tried, how they proceeded to reach and access this information, understand how it weakens the company, and use it as a case study to try and explain it to the majority, and go a step further. So security is really something that concerns us all, that allows us to understand why it happened. Knowing that my paycheck is being collected, in a very specific way. It's really about being aware that you can be submitted to an attack, but that you do have ways to respond. So it is also that is being more and more taught within schools, and not only engineering schools. We will. I would like to ask you how you organize and how you articulate all these type of trainings. Are we still following the traditional way?
In our agency, we provide keys with regard to externalizations. For example, publications, guidelines on remote security, and it also applies when you manage different types of systems, whether externalized systems or not. You also have second cloud. It's a reference base which can serve for suppliers and also for sponsors. And we have other types of tools. Beyond all this, we are trying to streamline all these recommendations, and we do this at the European level. because the streamlined activities carried out by the EU includes cloud services with the 3 categories of trust, the trust levels, and ANSI is present at the highest possible level, and the experience has shown that we were able to help various suppliers in this field. Vincent Trubel, our DG, told us to really understand the threat scenarios that we face. So we have streamlining, as I said, to facilitate access to market and facilitate upskilling. It will allow us to have reference points, and we also have other mechanisms, such as a mechanism to help small businesses, where we design SaaS or PaaS solutions, cloud solutions. Minister Maron talked about it this morning. We have a mechanism, a funding mechanism, support mechanism, which will allow a range of companies to upskill. These are targeted measures which will allow to strengthen people's skills in matters of security. And to conclude, there are also engineering schools, EPITA or INNOV, where I could work on AWS, and we see that these schools are rising to the challenge. They are improving the skills. In our methodology, we also have a notion of security champion, but in cloud migration projects, we also work on cloud champions. So it's about organizations which work on training so that they can increase know-how and knowledge on cloud. And there is also all the labeling paths that are available at Azure, Amazon, and GCP, where you have different levels for beginners, intermediate, and expert. This is reassuring for customers as well as for potential customers. And in a cloud career, this will be able to support you. For example, certification at Microsoft lasts for only 1 year. So you have to renew it every year, but the process is very simple. It takes time, but it allows you to upskill, to update your skills. There are also other paths. Some are less easily accessible, but all these are great things on a CV. I think that in cybersecurity, we should also open doors to women. I am not a specialist in cybersecurity. I have a fellow female friend in this environment, but I think that we need to do better in France. We need to open cybersecurity's doors to women so that they can take their role. The more women we will have, the more security we will have in cyber. This is my feminist moment. If I may, at Forman we have about 20 or 50 women who created a club, Cyber Girls, and they go to schools, to school at the various levels to try and raise awareness on this topic. Thank you. So we still have time. If we were to try and understand future trends, what would you say? In the upcoming 2 and 3 years, regulators will probably come up with a lot of materials. With regard to training, how should we anticipate future trends? Do you have a vision on this? Well, I think that it will also involve certification. The more certifications we will have, the more people will be certified, the higher levels of certification we will have. Before, we used to have a lot of audits, and this was allowing us to improve, to identify our weaknesses in terms of upskilling. And these audits were carried out internally. I think that in our career development paths, we need to have a critical thinking towards ourselves. Regardless of the situation, these training programs are difficult, but it's essential because it allows to upskill teams. And I really like certifications because I think that it prompts teams to do better and to do better in cybersecurity.
Peut-être deux enjeux qui me viennent à l'esprit en complément de ce qui a déjà été dit.
I'd like to say that we have two main challenges. First, trying to transpose what we do in cyber defense in the cloud, for example, with incident response, because the cloud environment means that it's now difficult to do what we used to do in cyber defense, or what we are doing in cyber defense. And here there are two avenues. In my view, in the future, we will need to upskill collectively. And there's also something we already talked about, the roles of all players, security. Here I'm thinking more specifically about developers. Developers are offering their solutions as a service, and because it's not, security is not an area of expertise, they haven't thought about all major intricacies in terms of security. And customers also have a responsibility in all this. So this is a great challenge. People need to understand what they do, and we need to upskill many players who have many skills but need to do better, for example, in security. Yann and Vivian, very often you talked about contracts, redrafting contracts. Contracts are vital, and we need to really say it. When you sign a contract, you really need to read it. The same goes for the cloud environment, and we see it with SaaS suppliers. This is how they can have control upon their environment, their architecture. Also, we talked about graduates, but there are system engineers, developers who are older, who have much more experience. It's possible to upskill them. It requires a lot of effort, but it's very rewarding. And there are many resources over the internet, including with Amazon. There are free of charge training programs. Feel free to use them. There are many possibilities, and we need to bring about change in this profession. We are recruiting a lot, and it's good to see that people have cloud experience. One last point, which goes back to what we were saying on sovereignty, and with the US, there is an extraterritoriality risk with the EU regulation. One member state will be able to ask one clouder to provide them with information. Otherwise, if they do not do it, they will have a fine. This regulation is being discussed right now in the EU Parliament. It should be voted for in the Parliament and then in the various EU member states. But this is a major threat that we need to look into very closely. Well, I like the concept of small is beautiful. And I think that we will increasingly need skilled employees, people able to understand the impact of data stored and the environmental protection as well. So people who really think outside the box. I don't know how to call this skill, but I think that the environmental impact is very important. As digital experts, we have a responsibility, and I hope that in the future this trend will go further. In the end, keeping it little applies to everything. And when we talk about data storage, we also need to keep it little. We haven't talked about the upskilling of decision makers, of leaders. How can we support them? How can we encourage them? Is it in training? Is it continuous training? Is it with exercises that we can change things with regard to leaders upskilling? Well, first, they need to be included in crises. They need to be at the forefront, because a crisis can take place within a company, but it can also go beyond. We need to know the level of crisis. We also need to raise awareness with regard to the essential nature of security, because if your CEO is not working on security, is not worried about security, nobody else will think about security in your entity. This should be fully part of your architecture, of your structure. I am a CEO, and you should know that CEO do their best to work on security. If they do not do it, this is a problem. When I talk to some of my customers, ultimately, if they should have a priority, it should be to make data security sure. And then there's the whole aspect of performance, but we need trust. We need trust throughout an organization. Otherwise, it cannot work. I fully agree. It all boils down to top management. The fines due to GDPR violations are another aspect. 4% of turnover for businesses. Businesses were very concerned by this. They realized that if they were to violate GDPR, they might lose 4% of their turnover. So these fines were a key element. It has allowed businesses to change the situation and to promote accountability. Yes, this was a good incentive. Especially that we are currently working on a project, on a similar project. We want to include SMEs or large corporations leaders because it can have an impact. And right now we are trying to simulate crisis situations to work with various players so that we know how the various players experience a crisis and to make them feel empowered to act in order to prevent future crises. The ultimate goal is to increase companies' resilience to such crises. Thank you very much. We have 12 minutes left. Do we have questions from the audience? We do not hear the question. So, if I may answer, it all depends upon your profession. For Azure, you have AZ 700. It's for the security engineer Azure. This is very efficient, and it gives you a global overview. With AWS, you have the security specialists. There are also various levels. With Azure, you have the cybersecurity architecture. It's a certification which looks into various dimensions, including compliance, governance, and the Sentinel system. So it's an entire system to secure your resources. It's very broad. Do we have other questions or comments? So typically there is a CCSP. It's an offer from ISCL2. It's essential for future RSSI. CCSP is the new offer. It's focusing on cloud. It will be coming up in summer. Yann, you said that it was about you talked about it earlier. When I made a cloud, I did it within an hour, and then you have things which are specific to implementation. At Azure, there are various concepts on copyright. So it's different depending on the incident. Thank you very much for your attention, and we'd like to thank all speakers as well.